To the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, will entrench an efficient tax system towards addressing the challenges of low level of tax to the gross domestic product, which stands presently at 6%, and also value-added tax at 5%. Now, under the new tax policy, consumers of luxury goods would pay a higher value-added tax. Now, a development economists say is apt, especially for the realization of 242 billion naira value-added tax to the budget this year, as against that of 198 billion naira in 2016. Now, what are the provisions in addressing the loopholes like corruption and tax touting? What are the provisions of the new tax policy on pioneer status being abused by multinationals? And what are the provisions about tax refund? Is Nigeria still rated low behind countries like South Africa, Zambia and Ghana, all competing for foreign direct investments? These are some of the issues we'll be examining tonight with a panel of experts. But first, let's get to see this report by Vivian Idekpefo.
According to the International Monetary Fund, taxation remains the only practical means by which governments can raise revenue to finance government spending on goods and services that citizens demand for. An ideal tax system for developing nations like Nigeria, experts canvass, should raise essential revenue without excessive borrowing by government. A major obstacle to an effective tax system in Nigeria has been pinned on lack of data and low levels of voluntary compliance, which makes it difficult for policymakers to assess the impact of any major changes to an existing tax system.
Where we, more than ever before, we were going on vigorous enlightenment, because there should be, if there is adequate enlightenment about obligations and rights of the taxpayers. So voluntary compliance, as we said, is what we encourage, rather than forceful approach to tax payment. But of course, where there is low or non-compliance, then you now have to bring in enforcement. And that's why we also have enforcement strategies.
Nigeria's competitiveness index averaged 3.55 points from 2007 to 2017, reaching an all-time high of 3.81 points in 2009 and a record low of 3.37 points in 2011, according to the World Economic Forum. Tax revenue to GDP in 2013 was 7%, according to the World Bank report. The International Bank also ranked Nigeria 182 out of 189 countries in ease of paying taxes in its 2016-2017 report. The 2016-2017 competitiveness ranking, as released by the World Economic Forum, places Nigeria 127 out of 138 countries surveyed. These development indices, according to experts, require the right tools, one of which is selecting the right tax system to achieve the desired results. The approved draft tax policy sets out to tackle some of the challenges associated with low compliance and revenue generation.
For me, it's like a catch-22 situation. If you don't pay tax, they won't be able to develop, and they're not developing, so you don't want to pay tax. But I would just want to say that at this time, the government should build confidence in the people by actually trying to use the taxes more effectively. Yeah, there is a whole disenchantment with the government and taxation right now.
In selecting the right tax system, the International Monetary Fund advocates that market forces be taken into consideration as they play a vital role in revenue generation. Experts, on the other hand, argue that as trade barriers come down and capital becomes more mobile, so also the challenges countries have with regards to effective tax policy. Vivian Idekpefo, NTA News.
All right, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's start off by introducing our guests to you. I'd like to welcome to this program Dr. Anthony Chibo Christopher, who's a development economist and international business strategist. Thanks for being with us here.
Thank you very much.
Also here tonight with us is Mr. Simon Kato, council member of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria and immediate past chairman of the CIT in Abuja. Thanks for being here tonight.
Good evening, viewers. Thank you, Strain.
All right. And joining us from our Lagos Network Center, we have Ms. Olajumoke Simplis, who is Deputy National President of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria. We also have Mark Anthony Dike, who is the immediate past president of the CITN, and Secretary Dotun Phillips Study Group on the review of the Nigerian tax system that recommended the adoption of a tax policy in 2003. He is also in our Lagos studio. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Good evening.
All right. And let's acquaint you with the procedure, as we always do every Tuesday. At the appropriate time, you can get to join in the discussion in the studio. The various platforms will be on your screens. We advise you take advantage of them. For those who will be calling in, we say this always. When your call gets through, do us a favor. Reduce the volume of your TV set. Just turn down the volume a bit. That's the way to avoid the hurlback or the echo. And go straight to the point. Don't bother too much about greetings. Just go straight to the point. Ask your question or make a comment. I guess we'll respond to such issues as you might raise. And we say this too. The best way to know if your call has been passed through, your name will appear on screen. And once that happens,
A voluminous a document,
okay.
and I want to dare say that it is it's a good document for implementation. However, if I may continue, it's a tax policy. In taxation, we have the tax law and we have how tax is implemented. The fact that there's a tax policy and that the people that call for a revision ask for it, it's very good. It shows that there is a consciousness to do something about positive about tax. But the fact that the tax policy and what I saw exists calls and shouts for a synergy, a positive reaction by the economic policy makers, economic and fiscal policy executors, to work in synergy in the implementation of that tax policy. If not, the tax policy becomes an academic document that is shelved somewhere and is, how do I call it, is referenced by people like us.
All right. Opening comments, good enough. We'll come back to you and look at some of the other issues about it. But let's hear from you, Simon Kato.
Thank you very much, Cyril. Like my colleague said, the current tax policy document as approved so far by the Federal Executive Council. This policy is succeeding or not. Now, with this laid down recommendation, one can only expect that they will have a good ending this time around.
All right. So it presupposes that what you currently have is not nearly been monitored as it should be.
Well, if it was monitored, there wouldn't have been a need for a review because we had a published document as at 2012. And meanwhile, just in your introduction, my president in Lagos, I'm sure, will be mentioned talking about that. He was involved right from 2003 when a recommendation was made. And so that becomes a challenge.
All right, we'll go back to our Lagos Network Center where we have Mr. Olajumoke Simplis and Mark Anthony Dike. And let's hear your opening comments about this reviewed tax system that has been proposed. Hopefully it should get to the National Assembly.
It's very interesting to know that the review, it's so simple And I believe that it should be made public. People should read it. People should be able to understand it. And like Simon has said, there is already an implementation committee, which is a very good starting point.
So Mark Anthony Dike, there is a current downturn in the economy. How does this revised policy speak to this?
Well, thank you very much, Cyril. I think the first thing I need to say is that policy drives action. If you look at the tax system, we'll talk about the tripod of a tax system: tax policy, tax legislation, and tax administration. Policy drives the legislation, because without a policy framework, you cannot have a very good, legal document, good law. And so I believe that this is very critical, very, very critical in the context of what we are trying to do as a nation. And therefore, I commend the effort, because the issues that have been addressed in the National Tax Policy document are issues that are quite germane to our tax system, even though you could say that we have always had, I must emphasize, a tax policy, but it has never been written down in any document until the Professor Dr. Phillips study group recommended that we have a documented tax policy. And without it, we cannot know how the direction we have to move as a country. So it is a good start for us, more compressed document that is more focused and concise and precise, that will drive the direction of our tax system.
Well, you have been involved with this since 2003. Share your experience, and what is it that over the years the country has not done really well in?
First and foremost, before 1999, of course, the military have been in charge. And luckily, virtually every year, immediately the military head of state announces the budget. Embedded in the budget pronouncement of the head of state are tax policy measures. The next thing that comes after the budget announcement is the draft, the decree. The decree is promulgated by the Supreme Military Council. So as the budget is released, the fiscal measures are released. So every year, because it need to be, the system, the economy is not static. The economy is dynamic. Things happen that will make useless whatever policy measures you put in place maybe a month ago. So you need to have a dynamic, system to be changing the tax laws in tune with the changing dynamics of the economy. We've not had that happening. Since 1999, we had the first amendment to value-added tax, to companies' income tax. In 2007, as a result of the study group report, it was not until 2011 that we had a holistic amendment to the Personal Income Tax Act. Since 2011, we are now talking about 2017. 6 years, no amendment to the tax law. And the economy has not been static. Things have been changing, and we need to change the tax laws in tune with the dynamics of the economy. And that is what has been lacking over the years, since the advent of democratic governance in Nigeria in 1999. We need to have a change, a bold, drastic change. Let there be a return to what we used to have during the military era.
All right, so many issues relating to this we'll look in. But back here in Abuja, yes, not very many people like paying taxes. We all know that. And so there have been suggestions that introducing what might be termed a negligible telecom surcharge which is said could earn the government some 100 billion naira annually. What's your take on that?
For me to take on that, I would like to give some foundation. It is true that there is research shows, I'm coming from the development economist side. So research shows, yes, that there's a direct positive link between a strong taxation system and development and economic development in a country. It's also true that the stronger the capacity for a government, for an authority to collect tax in a country where the more revenue collected is transparently seen to translate to economic development, to infrastructure, then it is true that the more the capacity to collect tax, then the more the economic development in a transparent where one can see the link. But the issue here now is in question for a strong taxation system. The very tricky question here is, in order to get you get a strong taxation system without choking or suffocating the polity, that's the taxpayer, and that's the economic finesse issue in it. How do I get a strong taxation system, and at the same time I am not choking the taxpayer? And that's where the issue of perception of tax, because of the question, the perception of tax, which varies from nation to nation. It's a very key determinant, because there are two schools of thought. There's the school of thought now for Nigeria, for Africa. I believe we don't need an established school of thought. We have different circumstances, because our circumstances here are, there is a distrust, there is, I beg to say, a negative perception of tax paying. And so the emphasis here, in my opinion, should be the findings there will determine how you implement your tax policy, when to implement them, and how to implement them, so that the perception and the compliance remains positive. If not, you have a document and there will be a disconnect with implementation.
Well, is it any wonder then that you'd say there was such a big outcry when there was some thinking about introducing what was called negligible? And then, I mean,
rather use it to have a better statistics of the number of people that because there's quite millions of people who have suddenly bought telephone lines. One person has, probably 3-4 lines, and we can use this to do better business within the time. And that is why this document also brings in the stakeholders. And of course, the taxpayer is a key player, just as the government is a key player. But every one of us has a stake. It's not for me to stand on this end and say, why should I pay this or that? I know we'll go into other areas, but if we talk at what you did mention, the Minister of Finance did mention, even with regards to luxury taxes, for instance. You see, these are consumption taxes where we are now saying, okay, you want to go on this kind of lifestyle and you have the money you can afford. Nothing stops you from paying extra to be able to live that lifestyle, but you make a higher contribution to the government in ensuring that others that do not have are able to now get what they are supposed to get. So at least, and in this, I think we are talking about fairness in this case.
all right, talking about the taxpayer, let's go back to our Lagos studio and we ask Ms. Olajumoke simply this. It's believed that it's only a small segment that is taxed, And even the small segment is overtaxed. How do you respond to that?
Taxpayers are very important in this equation. And I think the government, the tax administrators need to take them as partners in progress. Take them as customers. Take taxation as a product. Go to taxpayers and befriend them. Take them as the key that will open that door for revenue yielding. That is very important. For example, for the small taxpayers, there is nothing stopping the government, the tax officers, to create a desk for asking for helping the small and medium taxpayers to keep their books. Tell them how to keep their books. Keep their accounting documents for them. Even do the filing for them. Advise them on what to do. Advise them as to what areas they can take advantage of. You know, the big taxpayers are there. They have their auditors, they have their consultants that can help them. And they take it. You know, the big taxpayers, they take taxation as it is. It is a duty. Just like it is a duty for all of us to pay taxes. But the smaller taxpayers, even though some of them want to pay, they don't even know what to pay. So I think, starting from there, we can go and help them by having a desk, even in our office, or even having officers from revenue offices to go and meet them even in their shops. It's very important. Then, what are we looking at for small and medium taxes? We can reduce the rate of taxes for them. Reduce the rate of taxes for them. If we have a threshold, for example, for the registration of VAT, then we know that certain people cannot, if they do not fall within the threshold, they do not need to register for VAT. That takes them off that problem. And also, the government has to continue to educate the taxpayers. Simplify the documents. Write them in different languages. Even these tax policy documents, we can write them in different languages, Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo, and distribute to all of them. Then, you have talked about planning. I think governments should have who steal this money. And you hear people say, I won't pay. What I pay, they will not go and steal. You know, we need to take proactive actions towards all this. Let us see example of punishment given to people who are stealing money. One other thing that I want to also mention is the issue of even our political officers. How much taxes are they paying? I want to see a situation where even before they are elected, their tax history must be provided. What taxes have they paid? It's not that they will just come and bring 3 years tax certificates. No. What are the antecedents? What have they done concerning their tax matters? How much tax have they paid? From my practical experience, even the National Assembly members, they collect constituency allowances. Fine. It's not for them, it's not part of their income. It's for them to execute projects in their different constituencies. And as they spend that money, withholding taxes should also be paid. Value-added tax should also be paid. Are they paying? All this should go back to revenue. I have said, from my experience, I had to fight a state government concerning this. And they said it is political. And I said, no, I don't understand it like that. Even if you are going to do political patronage, if people do not pay such taxes for you to share, there won't be money for you to do political patronage. Even when you are doing political patronage, pay my VAT, pay my withholding tax. Because all these things, they create distrust. They create enmity between the taxpayers and the political group. So you see, I believe that all of us need to play our part. The government, play your part. Like my colleague said, Lagos State is a good example to follow. Government, pay your part. Taxpayer, pay your part. It is your civic duty. You must pay your taxes. Whether it is being used correctly or not, pay your taxes.
Much, Ms. Olajumoke, please. But we'll remain in Lagos and just move over to Mr. Anthony Dike and say, yes, is it a question of broadening the base now? Or just as we've been discussing in the last few minutes, getting people to pay more tax? Because let's face it, the moment you talk about a review, the first thing that jumps into anyone's mind is we might have to pay more. So let's examine that.
Thank you very much indeed, Cyril. I think it's certainly very important, going back to the brass tacks, that tax is a civic obligation of every citizen. I know during our study group days, Professor Dr. Phillips study group days, an argument was made, why should there be minimum tax? That some people are so poorly remunerated, their income level is below threshold, subsistence level, why should they be forced to pay minimum tax? But the point was made very persuasively that payment of tax is a civic obligation of every citizen who lives in a nation state. That when you pay tax, you are giving yourself a voice to demand for performance, to demand for development, to demand for provision of public and government services from government. Because government is an arbiter that now aggregates the interests of everybody and ensures that there is equity.
Now, this revised policy is, from what we understand, recommending paying more for luxury items. Have we been able to diligently collect those revenues, what was on the luxury items in the first place? Now we're talking about increasing that.
Well, I think that's an issue about luxury goods. Was an introduction of the last government, very late during the tenure of President Goodluck Jonathan. In the sense then that it is important, because you're not talking about stratification. From economic point of view, talk about goods that have inelastic demand as distinct from those that have elastic demand. Elastic demands are goods that obey the law of demand and supply. The higher the price, the lower the demand. The lower the price, the more the demand. But for those that are in elastic demand, are those cost consumption, luxury goods, which only the rich can afford. The poor people don't go for aircraft, helicopters, luxury yachts, buying luxurious cars, and so on and so forth. Those are not the things that bother the human, the ordinary person. You're talking about three basic needs of man: food, housing, and clothing. And that covers the bulk of the, of any person. I think the truth, therefore, is try and maximize tax revenue through indirect taxes like VAT.
Let's hear you on that. Maximize through taxes of VAT, for instance. And is it? We're looking at how many billion here? 242 billion,
yes.
as against 198 billion in 2016. Is that feasible?
Cyril, I'm still, yes. But there is, I must start answering your question by telling you that developed economies that are said to have a strong taxation system are collecting the percentage or not even the amount of tax they're collecting, and voluntary tax payments is a serious percentage higher than what we are what we are trying to expand our tax base to. There is a worry, a concern that must be addressed. Once the taxpayer is a willing participant in the tax system, that is when you can say, pardon my concern, or my stress in the concern, that is where you can say you have a tax system that is going to lead to national development. Expanding the tax base, finding different places where you can get more taxes and revenue, when the foundation and the perception of a tax is still negative, will not theoretically lead to national development. There has to be, and I am purely academic about this, there has to be a transparency between the tax I paid for a certain good, the tax I paid because I wanted to start a business. I must be able to subconsciously know that I'm paying it, and that is what has translated to the roads. That is what has translated to good schools. In economic development, from the point of view I come from, it has to be addressed. Research shows it clearly that where, executive powers, are curbed in the decision of taxation strategy, and then a strategy to tackle whatever misgivings anybody may have, the population may have for that.
All right.
Thank you. Let me just come in here. I have taken time to go through the tax policy document, and I want to bring us back there because that seems to be the subject matter. Most of some of the things that the Deputy Vice President in Lagos did enumerated, some of these things are actually variables already in the document. And that is why I will need to take us back to where we started, that it is a good thing that we have now had a government that has deliberately said, look, let's look at this thing again, bring it up in a way that we can get results out of it. So, despite the fears for increased taxes, whatever, I think the most important thing we should sell out in today's program is that let the people, like Shidit said in Lagos, let this document go around. Before people begin to comment and express even the fears, let's look at, because good enough, my colleague here, I am so comfortable with his basic scientific analysis with regards to how things ought to be done. And I think to quite a great extent, the people that looked into this document and reproduced this document have ideas with regards to the basics as provided by the scientific theories we have. The point here is this. Some of these things are already there. If this policy is implemented, because there are quite a lot of highlights we have not even taught yet that are existing in this very particular document. The various stakeholders that have been identified, you would find out that every one of them has a role to play. That is one. Secondly, a lot of things are being looked into. You know, there are proposals for some laws to be reviewed. There is even a proposal, for instance, for us to have a tax court that will educate on tax matters differently from the present high courts we're having and the rest. Talking about even the politicians, where we talked about the political will to get this thing done, there is a provision in one of the recommendations that suggests that even political parties will have to bring up their tax agenda, not just the individuals tendering their tax clearance certificates, and as it was rightly suggested from Lagos, that even these tax records be reviewed backwards. But the political party itself should come up with a tax agenda. The Ghanaian president made a statement when he took over as a president with regards to tax. Donald Trump made a statement with regards to taxes. These are issues that people will talk to you about when you're coming in. And when you come in, we hold you responsible for some of these things. So basically, these things are there. And I believe with the mindset we seem to be seeing from what the government has done so far, let's encourage the government and give them the opportunity to get this thing started. And it is an open document. Let there be enlightenment, and I think we'll be able to go forward from here.
Okay, let's try to see if we can...
On the Lagos example, transparency and seeing the tax money work will help encourage the taxpayer. That's one. Secondly, we should be able to make even the process of tax payment to be convenient and easy. It should be simple. People should not you should not go to filing returns, you want to pay your taxes, and you are stressed up in the process and frustrated in the process. So it now brings down even the issue of the tax administration. There is need for real improvement in the tax administration of the various relevant tax authorities, both the federal and the state tax authorities. There should be a friendly environment where people can walk in and they are well attended to, and all these things will encourage them in the process. We saw the statistics at the beginning, the ease of even paying taxes, and where we are so backward. And this document is even suggesting that we are targeting to see that we move to the top 50 economies on the ease of paying taxes by the year 2020. Now, if we will achieve this, then we would need to have quite a lot with regards to voluntary compliance. And again, even in the present relevant tax authorities, we are actually encouraging that. But that can only work on the basis of the trust that we've already talked about. Let me stop here. Thank you.
All right. I'd like to go over to Lagos, and I want to return to the issue of value-added tax here. Right. Do we still have a caller still on the line? Chukwuemeka from Port Harcourt calling in. Okay, let's try and see if we can get this call through. Chukwuemeka from Port Harcourt, go ahead.
Hello? 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 Hello?
That call to? Well, again, this is all part of what we're experiencing tonight.
Telecom tax.
Yes, telecom. I wonder if anyone would want to pay
his
any tax. For how many dropped calls we've had now, about 4 or 5. Anyhow, the issue of value-added tax and refunds. I am trying to find out how efficient is the current system. Now, we talk of a review, and we want to bring in a system of refund here. Do we have any credible refund system?
Yes, I think we have a credible refund system. I know that FIRS has been refunding because money has been made available. But the problem from experience is that when people apply for refund, they definitely will be audited to verify their claim. So a lot of people shy away from audit, so they don't apply for refund. Definitely refund system is there at FIRS for both VAT and companies income tax. Is there. So we have a system for refund, but I want to see a situation where even at our ports, you know, if you go abroad, you buy something that you are taking out, even from the ports, you get your refund. I think we need to also try and do that in this country, because when a foreigner comes in and buys goods, is going out, he should be able to request for the refund of whatever he has bought that has paid VAT on, which some of us take advantage of when we travel. We need to see that. Now, let's talk about these luxury goods. Okay, now, luxury goods, yacht. How many Nigerians are buying yacht? Luxury goods, plane. How many Nigerians? I want to say that pay extra for that's good. For that's good. But yes, there is a lot to get from VAT, because you know it is a direct, it's an indirect tax. The payer is anonymous. So the quantum, if VAT is properly
have been recovered and Boko Haram has been degraded. Our affected brothers and sisters are getting their lives back. However, they are now after you and me. In our mosques, churches, schools, motor parks, markets, entertainment centers, and public gatherings. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies.
Good people, great nation. Make you report any crooked person, object, or wakajube movement to police and security agent demo.
The security of our nation now work for all of us, plus including me and you.
Nigeria, make we unite against terrorism. Now, Federal Minister of Information and Culture bring on this message.
Thank you very much indeed. I think the issue is there is absolutely greater need for more openness, more enlightenment of taxpayers of their rights. I've canvassed the need for a more friendly relationship between the tax administrators and the taxpayers. I need to remove this adversarial attitude, either from the taxpayer towards the tax administrator and vice versa. That need for more openness, knowing even the tax administrator is also a taxpayer, and that's a point I always emphasize. You need to build trust between the taxpayer and the tax administrators. The refund process has been going very well, but you know the problem about refund is that you must be adjudged to have overpaid your tax before a refund can be made. You have situations where, you know, in Nigeria, a lot of people hide a lot of their incomes. And then now suddenly, because they had some tax withheld, they bring that. Unfortunately, when they bring that kind of evidence, you find out that that particular income that suffered that deduction was not even reported in their tax return. And therefore, how can you be talking about getting a refund? There's still need for more openness and transparency on either side. Trust need to be built in that particular process. But one thing that is very clear, and we have always said it, is that if a taxpayer, in fact anybody overpays money than he's legally obligated to pay, he's entitled to a refund. It doesn't matter, because the power of restriction we have in Nigeria is that, okay, fine, the deduction you are presenting as overpayment is, VAT, but you have, you don't have any more liability. Why don't you refund it to me? If that money is refunded to me, it becomes money in my hand. You cannot be calling it VAT or company's income tax or education tax or whatever tax, because it is money. So once it has been ascertained, it doesn't matter whether I have, I don't have any liability on that. Give it back to me. People say that government should not be keeping the money for people. It's enough, the one I have paid that is legally due, is enough for government to use. Let other people also pay. I think that's what is critical in that particular refund.
Let's try the phones once again. We have from Jigawa Abdurrahman. Oh dear. Tonight is turning out to be one of those difficult nights. Talking about the phone-ins. Well, we'll still keep trying the phones. We'll keep working on them and see if we can get one or two ideas from people who are watching this program. Okay, back here in Abuja Center, let's come to you, Dr. Christopher. What about the question of abuse? I've heard suggestions that company tax should be lowered. There are many Nigerians today who will tell you that multinationals are finding easy ways of abusing the policy that we have now.
Yeah. On face value, I would agree. I mean, there are quotas, there are taxes. Oh, let's be careful. Any policy, any strategy in Nigeria that does not, or any solution, suggested solution, revised solution that does not take into consideration that C word, the popular C word that we have here, is not workable. Our systems are abused, our systems are beaten, left, right, and center. Now, compliance, that is, in my opinion, the reason why it will be necessary, because in my opinion, the greatest fight against abuse would be the co-option, the nurturing, the development of voluntarily payment. And I do not blame you for smiling at that. However, I would stress that even in our country, we have examples of community projects that work because there is community buy-in. Our tax system will work if there is population buy-in. Yeah. It will work. Let me say something positive. The fact that there was a tax review, the fact that there was a simplification of a complex tax system is a step in the right decision. It brought about this discussion. Now, compliance and the stemming of, that's the stopping of abuse is in the synergy between what the tax policy advocates and the strategy that will be used for the implementation. It is possible. And the simplification of tax payment is synonymous or has a correlation with the reduction of tax abuse. The more complicated it is to pay your tax, the more complicated it is to get a refund. The more complicated it is to participate in taxation in Nigeria, the higher the degree it is to abuse it. Hello, sir.
Right. Now, one of the things that would lead to abuse and corruption, really, Simon Kato, you live here in Abuja.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have come across all kinds of characters on the highways in Abuja, stopping vehicles, claiming to be representing local councils and asking for evidence of payment of one form of tax or another. This is replicated in virtually all the states of Nigeria. That brings us to the question of the different layers: federal, state, local councils, every one of them demanding. You have this revised policy.
Yep.
People have tried, governments have tried to streamline this, largely unregulated collection. How can such a revised policy address this issue? Because that's what people are crying out about.
Thank you. Thank you very much. In fact, this revised policy has it as a major objective to address that. And one of the early points in the highlights of the policy clearly states that this document is out to address multiplicity of taxes as well as multiplicity of revenue collecting agents. One strong recommendation that has been made is, can we have one revenue collecting agent for each each tier of government? That is now on the table to be discussed. And let me say it loudly. How possible is it that the various agencies, even at the federal level that we have, that are all struggling to collect taxes here in Abuja, how convenient and possible is it that they will be merged so that we now have a simplified tax collection that will now ensure that monies are collected from one revenue collecting agency and then remitted accordingly? We have such a system now in Ghana, and I think we have that system also in South Africa, where you have a common revenue authority that is responsible for collecting all these taxes. Now, by the time you do that, it has already addressed a major challenge that we're facing today. That's one. Secondly, how do we address all these multiple taxes? Where, I said this recently on a program like this, where one person on the same business source is being asked by 10 different revenue agents to pay taxes on the same thing. It doesn't work that way. And that kind of person cannot voluntarily pay taxes. He will look for places to run and go and hide. But I'm saying that this document is addressing that. But let me put this before you pick your next question. I think we are now reaching the bottom line. How strong are our institutions in this country? I think that's the major thing.
Okay, we'll come to that question. We'll not stop trying the phones. Port Harcourt, Joseph is calling in from Port Harcourt. Let's see if this will get through. Hello, Joseph. Oh dear.
Hello?
Hello, go ahead.
Hello? Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
Presenters out there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Doesn't come out.
Asking for refund in holistically and having a situation where you filed for company's income tax and you have withholding tax credit notes. That you are allowed to use as credit offset against future taxes. But where you have refunds holistically now. That is when you apply to FIRS, and that is when audit is now done to ascertain. Definitely, if you have a situation of refund runs into millions, at times billions. So if you have millions and you are asked to use credit, then it means that you will carry on and carry on and carry on. But situation of refund is totally different from situation of using credit. In the ordinary course of transaction, you can have excess. Maybe you paid excess tax because you didn't even have your withholding tax credit notes. But once you now establish that you have your withholding tax credit notes, you can use them as credits, as offset against future taxes. Yes, refund is being made. Please go to FIRS and find out.
Siri, can I just...
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I think a critical issue, like my colleague has stated, very clearly, is that in Nigeria, we have different tax types, and each tax type has a different account. Company income tax account, education tax account, value-added tax account, and National Information Technology Levy. Some of these are direct taxes that FIRS collects for and on behalf of the federal government. And of all the tiers of government in Nigeria, like companies income tax, payroll profit tax, capital gains tax, paid by companies. But when it comes to education tax, that tax is collected by FIRS for and on behalf of Tertiary Education Trust Fund. National Information Technology Levy is collected for NIDA. So for instance, when people are talking about challenges, that has to be taken into context, because you cannot, for instance, transfer an excess you have for companies income tax to go and offset your liability for VAT, or to offset your liability for education tax. I think that's the part of the challenge that people are having. But also the converse is equally true. If I have an excess, if you refund me the money, it is now money in my hand, and I'm free to use it anywhere I like, either to go and offset another tax liability that I have, or to go and pay my children's school fees. But as long as that money is locked up in government coffers, it has no utility value to me. I think that's a challenge that needs to be addressed in Nigeria. That's where I think people are talking. But seriously speaking, when people have failed to disclose particular sources of income and don't disclose it, and then you now want a refund, government will now want to be able to look at it. Or the other problem is they're reporting themselves. They have a withholding tax on rent that they earned, but did not report rent as an income. So when they now bring it for refund to offset their tax on other income that they earned and on which they're supposed to pay tax, then they are now reporting themselves of tax evasion. So these are challenges that people need to also understand.
Yeah, but I would also like you to comment on the issue of multiple taxation, and there are so many revenue collecting agencies, federal, state, local council, local government level, and everyone is just collecting and collecting. And these are the issues that affect the voluntary, payments system. How do you address that?
It was an issue that came very strongly in Professor Datu Phillips' report in 2003. In fact, in the course of our work over a year, we went around many states of the country. And some states have as many as 147. One state particularly, I don't want to mention that state, and as many as 147. All manner of taxes are being imposed. And you know what it simply is. It is the same human being. That's the way I analyze it. That's being asked, you want to cut one finger, the other finger, the other leg, the other toe. It's the same human being that you're paying all these taxes. That is better, as in the epilogue to that Professor Datu Phillips report, that ultimately there should only be two types of taxes, either income and expenditure. And it is more efficacious to impose tax on expenditure because of the invisible nature of the tax on expenditure, which we call consumption taxes, indirect tax. Unlike imposing tax on income, the man has to disclose his income. And you find that, catch me if you can. Until that person discloses his income, or you're able to ascertain that he's hiding some income, you will never be efficient in maximizing tax collection on direct taxes. That is easier because you can access the expenditure. Through the expenditure, you can access indirect taxes. So it is therefore very important that you rationalize taxes, bring them low, the rates to be low, because the trend is reduce the burden on direct taxes and transfer it to indirect taxes. Unfortunately, we are stuck with the direct tax rates, and then also stuck with indirect tax rate at 5% since 1993, and managed to reduce direct tax from 30% for corporate taxes, from 35% to 30%, and we are left with it since 1993, 24 years going. Personal income tax was top rate was 25% because of the resistance of the states that they will lose their tax base if you reduce this thing from 25, the top rate, to 17.5. Now they only 1%. How much are most states collecting from personal income tax? So it is better that you reduce the personal income, the direct tax rates, whether on personal income or corporate income, and they shift the burden to consumption taxes and maximize tax collection, because it is easier to evade taxes on income than on consumption taxes. The machinery can be strengthened.
Taxes may be imposed, but remittance is another kettle of fish altogether. And here you have so many guilty parties. Corporate remittance, including government agencies. It is low in this country.
Including government agencies. Yes. Yes. Let me speak to that. That when it comes, an individual not remitting his tax, and a government agency not remitting their tax or what they're supposed to pay, it speaks volumes about what I spoke the last time you asked the question, about being able to address address the discipline and the strength at which tax is collected, the capacity for the state to collect tax. Cyril, if you don't mind, I would like to still stress in this context here. I don't want to sound like a bell, so I'll say it in different different ways. We're talking about national taxation, national what do you call it, development. Now, the revised tax policy, beautiful document. If you read it, it already talks about equity. Yeah, it talks about fairness. It talks explicitly about eliminating duplication of taxes, multiplicity of taxation, and it talks about making sure compliance,
low cost compliance,
and also enforcing compliance. So that tells you that we know what the problem is. When I mean we, I mean Nigerians. The policy says it.
There has never been a shortage of knowledge.
No, that's not the issue.
Right.
Remember, the issue is the implementation, and we keep on. Sorry to sound it back, but we keep on putting the cart before the horse. And I'm saying it. Don't shoot me. We need to research and come back, and all these things need to be put into variables before it even gets to the public. And the questions that we are answering here must be answered quantitatively, analyzed, then with political will, implemented. If not, we'll have a beautiful policy and we'll be stuck with
right.
no implementation.
Well, back to the phones. Another trial with the phones from Benin this time. Sextus calling in from Benin. Hello. Good evening. Yes.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Go ahead.
Hello.
Go ahead.
My contribution concerns the tax. When you is a good development, because when you travel to other country, outside country, you see something concerning tax, like what the woman said from Lagos. Is anything concerning tax? They pay tax in hotel, even food, even money you pay in hospital or anything. They will ask you to pay. When you pay too much of money, excess of money, you have to pay for tax. So it's a welcome development.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
Cyril, let me add up to the point we were discussing, and I think that was where I initially stopped when I mentioned the need for strong institutions. And just with what has just been cited, the simple question is, what is the incentive that makes me travel to Ghana here in West Africa? And I seem to follow due process. I follow the law. If there is need to queue, I don't jump the queue. I do what is right. But once I come back to Nigeria, I appear not to do the same thing, and it is the same me. What makes people to readily comply in economies that appear stronger than ours? And when it comes up here, we look for ways to dodge, like the president said, catch me if you can. Now, I think one thing, there is an incentive that suggests I can do this, go away with it, and I will not be caught. And that seems to have influenced some of the behaviors we see with regards to non-compliance, even on taxes. We've identified quite a number of reasons and excuses, but I want to tie it up with the fact that if we can now have institutions that will work, tax policies that will be strong enough to drive tax administration, tax policies that will be strong enough to drive and bring in laws that will be implemented properly and decisively, and to add it up, the will to ensure that such policies are actually implemented. I tell you, we will move from here. Everybody will be so excited. One thing I believe and which I see about Nigerians is the fact that, look, we are law-abiding and we can do the right thing. But all we need is, let's get the right clue. And you'll see that every person falls into line. Why you see, but in a situation, so what I'm saying, if you are doing a particular act and the incentive suggests that what you are doing, you are more comfortable with it, you keep doing it. Even people that are hiding that would not disclose their income, by the time they are identified and disciplined, things will change. Recently, we had a court ruling in which a governor came up. At a point, there was a ruling that his tax clearance certificate was not correct. The records in his tax clearance certificates were not correct. And then later on, the thing was changed. But what I'm saying, that is even on the political angle. If politicians should get to realize the fact that on issue of not complying to tax payment can cost them their offices, can cost them their jobs. Companies can be sanctioned, and it will be done in a transparent manner. I think things will definitely work.
Right, you just mentioned incentives, and you rounded off talking about sanctions. This revised policy, did it deal in depth with the issue of incentives, sanctions, because where we have had a policy in the past, where certain companies, corporate bodies, were given certain incentives. Other experts have described those incentives as way out of this world and not practiced anywhere. We had gone overboard. And this had affected, revenues that could be collected. Did this document, this proposed review, did it address that?
Yes, it did. This issue is addressed with regards to, giving waivers, for instance, in areas that it must be and properly monitored and checked, because people have taken advantage.
Well, I tried to stay away from the word waivers,
and I just picked it up. Well, but that's actually it, and I think it is addressed in a nutshell. And like I said, you rightly heard me when I even said that there is even a suggestion that the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Finance should even propose a bill for a tax cut so that issues like this are well treated. In terms of sanctions, penalties, and the rest, most of them may not necessarily be found in much more detail in this summarized tax policy. But by the time you go into the various tax laws, there are penalties and sanctions to quite a number of these things.
Well, since the subject of waivers, and the word waivers was actually introduced by Simon Kato, let me take it over to Lagos and ask Ms. Olajimoke please. It's been one of the most abused words in this country, the waivers, and we're talking here about incentives as which to encourage people to do what's right. How well do you think this revised policy would address this issue?
Sir, I'm not for waivers and incentives as such, because statistics has shown that with or without waivers, things will still work. Those companies that we are giving waivers, you see, in this country, we are used to abusing authorities. You find that political parties take advantage of waivers, which does not augur well for this country. We cannot continue to give waivers. If we are going to give waivers, let it be written why you are giving that waiver. What is the advantage it's going to give to Nigeria? The advantage, that waiver, what is the opportunity cost of that waiver to Nigeria? Are there alternatives? Are there complementary substitutes? So why give waivers? We need the policy, the tax policy has somehow addressed it, and that even where waivers are given, it must be properly monitored. Monitored so that it is not abused. Monitored if you are giving a waiver for a period of time, to make sure that at the end of that period, a report is given, it is evaluated, what is supposed to be, what they promised to do, have they done it? Is it to the advantage of Nigeria? So I'm not for waivers at all. Let all be on the same scale. Let all manufacturers, all suppliers come on the same scale. Let us now see who will give us a better weight.
Okay, from Niger State, Mina Stephen is calling in from Mina, Niger State. Hello, Stephen. Is Stephen still on the line? Hello, Stephen. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hello?
Hello, go ahead. You're
Hello?
on.
Yes, hello, hello. Hello?
Your name is on the screen, so go on.
Hello?
We can hear you. Go ahead. Well, Stephen, it would seem that you're shy of making this contribution. We took your call, your name appeared on screen. We still can't hear you say anything apart from hello. All right. Well, we'll stay in Lagos, and Mr. Anthony DK is still there on the issues of punishments and, yes, incentives. What's your take?
Thank you very much. I think the issue of incentives very ordinarily germane, but then incentives must be clear and properly, stratified. From all international best practices, incentives and waivers are no longer, recommended because they are lazy and corrupt, instruments in the hands of those who grant it. For us in Nigeria, incentives and waivers that are in our tax status are not time-bound, they're not properly stratified, and the people take them for granted. The only incentive I can see in our tax law that looks stratified is incentives for agribusiness, and that one worked because it was not just an incentive predicated on implementation by the Revenue Authority, but also with CBN, because the issue about inter-agency cooperation becomes very key. The issue about how to incentivize agribusiness. Nobody was giving loans to agribusiness because banks lend on short term. They want their money quick. But given the long gestation period of agribusiness, as much as long as 7 years, there was need to find a way out. And that's why the CBN now created agri-finance scheme. And then the banks were now, implementing that for and on behalf of the central bank. And then the revenue now came in. I said, okay, fine. If a bank that gives a loan that has a moratorium and a repayment period in excess of 7 years, there will be 100% exemption of interest that such a bank earns. So there was a timeline there. But for a lot of other incentives in our tax laws, we don't have any timelines, embedded. But more recently, the incentives that were given for interest on bonds for for corporate entities, there are strict timelines, and therefore for monitoring. At least 1 year to the end of such incentives, start monitoring how well that has worked. So incentives should be granted as an exception, not as a rule. And the effect must actually be, quantified and measured.
Let's try Maiduguri on the line. Ibrahim, this may well be our last trial of the phones, and I understand that we've lost that connection there. So that would be it for the phones. But as we begin to wind down, let us look at just one aspect that many might think, and that's talking about the motivation. If you have individuals, companies, corporate bodies who do what they expected to do as and when due,
okay,
what would be the motivation that would keep driving them to do the right thing?
In one word, and of course I will expand: transparency.
Right.
Transparency. There's an economic thought called real-time transparency. Real-time transparency is not boxing yourself to any model, inherited model from the colonialists, and actually coming down to say, okay, this is what you're paying, and this is where it's going to. It's a new concept, but it is not established. But that is what it means by not thinking in the box or even out of the box. This thinking without boxes. What if no boxes here? What if in tax, think of the possible success we would have if you actually knew, what your taxes were being used for. That would change the whole ball game. and that would motivate you. Not only would it motivate you, it gives you the power to monitor. And that's the transparency. Yeah. Now, a big thing that we do not have here is transparency. Neither, and when there's no transparency, you don't even have any record of monitoring. I am advocating, and a lot of economists are advocating, that we inherited a lot of systems, we inherited a lot of structures. But these are not our structures. We haven't, this is, I'm now talking of an African thing and a Nigerian thing.
Homegrown.
Yes. They are not homegrown. And we all came from somewhere. And if you check our revenue collection and tax collection, be it the northern regions, be it the western regions, I'm not talking of the western and northern regions of Nigeria. I'm talking of even before that. They were efficient. They were community-based, and it was transparent. You knew where your money, if you had to contribute for something, you knew where it was going to. Now, there is no shame. I know that development has come, many years have passed, but that concept, as simple and simplistic as it sounds, it works today in community health projects, in community road projects. Okay. Now, we should not, in my opinion, feel that because we have a tax regimes and a complicated system, we shouldn't be shy in introducing simple measures. Let me give you an example. The concept of we shouldn't allow corruption of many to make us hate certain economic tools, such as the waivers you talked about and the incentives, because they've been abused. They still remain economic tools that could be used if only we can get what is called beneficial FDI, and that is what my colleagues have talked about, and LDI as well. So I think it's without taking too much of your time, I think it's a good thing that we continue to go in the direction we're going, but we should remember to think and bring about our own, what do I call it, solutions. Our own solutions will bring about our own motivation to do the whole thing.
Right, Simon Ketu.
Thank you. Talking of the motivation that will let us get there, I think I would say all the stakeholders should take ownership of their own responsibilities and ensure that they get them done. Government, on its part, he talked about transparency. Government should be able to let the taxpayer and the trust of government so that we will see the sincerity we're talking about. And once that sincerity is seen and the trust is earned, there would be compliance, because that's enough motivation. The media and other advocacy groups should do what we are doing here today, and I must thank NTA for letting us have this platform, because this is an outright enlightenment. People have been able to listen, hear us, and they are even making contributions. Now, that is a role that the media and other advocacy groups should be able to play. The taxpayer, either at company level or at individual level, should equally also see tax payment as a civic responsibility, because we can't run away from the fact that it is a social contract. We are together. We need government, and government need us. So we must work as a team. So if every stakeholder gets to do what he is supposed to do, the tax administrator needs to equally work, get his job done as a professional. And this is where we should also watch who serves as a tax practitioner and a tax administrator. You should be well refined. You should know what you're doing, because it has to do with people's monies, and do it right, so that we don't have people that will go about and rather aid tax evasion instead of getting the right thing done. I think I should stop here. Thank you.
All right. And we go over to our Lagos Center. Mr. Olajumoke, Simplis, your closing comments as we wind down here.
Of incentives to taxpayers. Oh yes, fine, beautiful. What about incentive to tax administrators? You know, in taxation, you work and you collect the money. If you are not well remunerated, you are not happy doing the job. So I'm saying that incentive that we're talking about should also be given even to the administrators. Let each state internal revenue services be autonomous. Let them be given cost of collection so that they have money to pay for professional services, to train their staff, to let them professionalize, because you cannot give what you don't have. Even if you are going to a taxpayer, you are going to a corporate taxpayer and you are wearing shoe that has gotten this half drawback, definitely you have complex talking to the taxpayer. But if you are well paid as an administrator and you are well trained, you know your onion, you are well dressed, and you go to a taxpayer's office, you talk with confidence. It is an incentive to give your staff enough money to take them home, enough money to take care of their families. Otherwise, they will drain. There will be leakages even in tax collection. So incentive, not only to taxpayers, yes, you give incentive, you recognize them, you give them, there's nothing wrong in calling them even for a dinner. Those you identify as real corporate organizations that have paid their taxes as and when due.
Right, thank you. We'll flip over to Mr. Back Anthony Dike as he rounds off too. Yes, corporate bodies, perhaps you reward them. The silent majority who have no, who have no way of not paying their taxes because it's deducted at source. They just continue to be the compliant people.
Yeah. So I think the ultimate benefit for everybody, because we talk about the benefit principle in taxation. Late Professor Samaluko, my professor of applied economics in my university days, talks about the quid pro quo principle. You give, you expect to receive something in return. And therefore, there has to be performance. There has to be transparency. And I want to make this other point about, issue about equity principles. On the part of government, there are two agents for government. The tax administrator that collects the tax for and on behalf, not just of the government, but for everybody, as well as those who spend that money that the tax collector collects. They make the job of the tax collector very difficult. When they did not perform, they did not give value to the taxpayer for the money that he has paid. Then you cannot encourage the taxpayer to continue to pay.
Policy approved by the Federal Executive Council would hopefully find its way to the National Assembly, and we might yet see one or two more adjustments in it as the debates go on. But at this point, we'd like to say thank you to both our guests in our Lagos Network Center, Ms. Olajumoke Simplis, Deputy National President, Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, CITN, and Mr. Mark Anthony Dike, immediate past president of the CITN, and who has been involved with these matters since 2003 with the Dotun Phillips Study Group on the review of the Nigerian tax system. We thank you both for joining us on this program. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
All right. Thanks. And back here in our Abuja studio, let me say a big thank you to Dr. Anthony Chibu Christopher, development economist and international business strategist. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Cyril.
And for Mr. Simon Kato, council member of the CITN and immediate past chairman of CITN Abuja, thank you once again for coming.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
And to you too, thank you for being part of this program. Next week we'll reach you again on NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stober. Bye for now.